And welcome back to ClarkCountyToday.com, continuing our series of videos talking with some local elected officials and representatives from around Clark County. With us today, Mayor Mike Dalesandro with the City of Battleground. Mayor, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate having me here.
Yeah, we always like to start out, just kind of give you an opportunity to share a little bit of what you're like when you're not up behind the dais or wearing your mayoral badge. What do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun? Being mayor's fun.
We actually had this conversation before.
Yeah.
You were like, what, do I do anything
No,
other than...
I love music. That's my one, so it's a guilty pleasure, but I love music. I don't get to play as much as I'd like to, just because of my schedule, and drums are pretty loud. I play drums, sing a little bit. So listening to music is a huge release for me, an opportunity to just kind of collect myself, and obviously hanging out with my family.
So if I saw you driving down the road, you'd be the guy.
You're gonna see me doing this
yeah.
on the
Okay.
It annoys my wife. She can't stand to drive with me with the music on. but music, and of course I'm playing with my 7-year-old and
boy, girl,
Sophia, boy,
girl.
Wow.
Well, there are boys.
Well, yeah, no, I guess so.
It's a guy named Sally or Sue. Anyway,
boy named Sue.
Boy named Sue, no. Right?
It keeps me busy. Between that and the mayor stuff. So
I got 2 little ones too, so yeah. I know how that is. So let's get to talking a little bit about the city of Battleground. I thought it'd be interesting to just kind of, for the outsiders who don't know, Battleground, the 3rd most populous city in Clark County, but kind of tucked away. I think a lot of folks don't realize just how big Battleground is. I think you guys are nearing 21,000 within city limits, but people also, when you say Battleground, I think people think much bigger than just the city, because the 98604 zip code, it covers a lot bigger geographical area than just the boundaries of the city itself. Sure. For anybody who doesn't know about Battleground, how would you describe it to them?
It's Americana. It's a small town. We've got it's a blue collar community, rural community. We've grown quite a bit, as you mentioned. The city's doubled in size in the last 15 years. So that's continues to be sort of a struggle for us to work through, because people are moving to our community because of the small town feel. Outside of that, we're the gateway to the outdoors. That's what I tell people all the time. We're within minutes of hiking, fishing, boating. It's just an ideal location. We're in a metro area, but we're not a metropolitan town. We're a small town, but we're within distance of Portland, but we're not too close to Portland. And so it's a place where we said 80,000 people identify as home, even though it's a 21,000 population city.
That's what I was saying. You might, census data says Camas is slightly larger than you guys.
Yeah.
But I think if you actually talk to people in Clark County and said, where do you live? You'd find a lot more people say Battleground than Camas.
Yeah, we're the hub for North County. We're services, medical services, restaurants, shopping, banking. People that live north of Battleground do most of that in our city. So a lot of people identify as Battlegrounders that live 5-10 miles away even. So it is a little unique for us, and it can create some challenges for us as well, because we'll get people reaching out to us, hey, I've got this problem, and well, I can't do much for you, but here's a county counselor's email. It's because it's outside of the city, but
yeah. Full disclosure, I am a Battlegroundian myself. Battlegrounder.
Yeah.
I grew up. I grew up out there, and I still don't know how that goes.
That's
but
right.
I grew up out there. I lived in Vancouver for a while. We're back out in Battleground, and so if I ask you any pet peeve questions,
sure.
No. But it is interesting. You said gateway to the outdoors, because just recently I drove up to Yakult, and it's crazy to me how from where we are, you go up past Daybreak School. You get on to 503, you go north, and you're in basically the middle of nowhere. You're in the outdoors.
You are, yeah.
And it's always crazy to me to think that I live in a town, and all of a sudden I can be outdoors. I can be at Louisville Park. Yeah. I can be at Battleground Lake State Park in just a few minutes, or Kiwanis Park. There's all these things that you can do. I wanted to transition from that because you guys just did this huge visioning project.
We did.
And Gateway to Outdoors was kind of the slogan that came out of that, the idea that you got from the survey that you did, talking with folks all over the city.
Sure.
And getting their perspective on what do you want Battleground to be. So we've gone through that. Now I know the next part of this is getting your new city manager is now also still your planning
Yeah.
manager, Erin Erdman,
Yeah.
to kind of go through this.
She's in the midst of hiring her
process.
replacement to her old job. Been promoted to city manager since
She's got
October.
a lot on her plate.
Yeah, yeah.
And so part of that will be sort of the next step, looking at what assets do we have? How do we actually make that vision? You and I sat down a while back when you were going through this visioning process and talked through kind of how you envision this playing out for future city councils. Talk about kind of what comes next. What's next in this process? When will folks start to see some of the fruits of all of this?
I'll go back quickly 1 second, then go to that. I think it's really critical to mention as well, the city hadn't done anything like this in over 15 years. And the city, like I said, has doubled in population since then. So the big goal for council was to reach out to the citizens. We had I believe over 2,000 respondents to the survey. We had hundreds of face-to-face conversations. We had the town hall, I believe, that you attended as well. And so we had all these conversations. We had a group of citizens called the Navigators, who were volunteers, stakeholders in the community, to pull all of this together and bring a recommendation to council. And so we got that recommendation late last year, and it focused really primarily on keeping the small town feel, but also adding some more opportunity for job creation in our community. So as we move forward, the council's big priority here was to get that information and then start to make adjustments to our course. That's what we call ironically, the Navigators, right? And the roadmap to Battleground's future. So as we navigate, we want to make some course corrections. And the first step this year is we're starting a land use plan update, which is technical wonky stuff, but it's important for us to do that because that really sets the table for density, sets the table for where we're going to have commercial areas in the city, future industrial job growth in the city, and takes a comprehensive sort of holistic look at the whole picture. We haven't done that in forever. So that's a really good exercise for us. And also we're doing a transportation plan update. As with growth, infrastructure tends to always lag just because of funding concerns. So those are the first two steps. And as we move forward, we'll be doing a parks plan update. We'll be looking at potentially setting up neighborhood districts, maybe similar to what Vancouver's done. We haven't taken a deep dive into that yet. But really, it's about giving this council, and this council isn't going to be there forever. Other people will serve in our place as time goes on. So it helps us create that course that other councils can align on as well going forward. So we're not making decisions here, and the next council comes in and makes them here. So on the big stuff, the big picture stuff, we're all aligned on where the community is going because the community told us where they wanted to go.
Folks want to know, when you talk about growth, what are the areas within the current city limits of Battleground? Obviously, the county is dealing with their own Growth Management Act issues and trying to figure out when can you annex and where can you annex. But given what you have now, where do you guys at this point kind of envision some of that growth happening?
Well, in our current existing urban growth boundary, we're seeing a lot of growth happening on the eastern part of the city, northeastern part of the city. We're starting to see some on the southern part of the city near Cedars. We're starting to see infill as well in other areas. I know as a council policy-wise, we went out during the last comp plan update a few years ago, and we're looking to do some urban growth boundary expansion to the west of the city, which is where we feel as a council that there's the best potential for economic development in the city when it comes to jobs. Because of the proximity to I-5 and along the new 502 Battleground Highway, that's where we see, I think, the job growth happening, and really residential growth is just going to be more infill and in the existing current boundaries of the city.
I know that there was some disappointment at a lack of funding from the legislature for some funding shortages for especially the interchange there at 502, 503, the Main Street 503 interchange. What are some of the conversations kind of happening right now about how to deal with that? Because I know that's a big question that a lot of folks that live there and have to drive through Battleground ask every day.
Sure.
Is, when are we going to see some improvements to this crazy busy intersection?
It's a great question. The project is moving forward. The 502, 503 interchange project was in 3 phases over several different budget cycles up in Olympia. So the challenge is you get a portion of money now, you get a portion of money 2 years from now, another portion of money 2 years after that. So we're in the midst of phase 2 right now. Phase 2 is really the bulk of the project. It's the majority of the cost. It's where we're adding turn lanes in all directions. We're adding a turn lane capacity, right, to help meet all the traffic. I mean, you've been to that intersection. I've been to the intersection. It's there are times it's pretty stressful to get through town. And so we're working on that. Now our state legislators, we've been working with them to try to shore up funding, because what's happened is this project was first costed out several years ago. We've had inflation, costs of just doing business go up, right? And construction costs go up. So making that inflationary adjustment is critical, because if we don't make that adjustment, parts of this project won't happen, because the city doesn't have millions of dollars laying around for infrastructure improvements. If we did, we'd been doing them. It's just, It's not practical for us. So this next phase had about a $1.3 million gap, which we went to Olympia and asked for that, did not get that in the budget, which was very disappointing. I've had some conversations with legislators one-on-one since then. We feel there's going to be an opportunity in next year's supplemental budget to put another ask in. But again, we feel that we want Olympia to basically fall through on their promise. That's what this is all about. And we don't want to turn to the taxpayers of Battleground and say, remember that gas tax that got enacted several years ago, and you're supposed to have this project where you're going to get some of it, but you're not going to get all of it. We don't want to do that.
Got to pivot a little bit. So I-1639, voter-approved initiative, gun control initiative, very controversial. Battleground kind of became
the battleground.
The battleground over that a little bit, with a lot of Second Amendment folks, Patriot Prayer, Joey Gibson, and some of his folks coming into council and asking that Battleground declare itself a Second Amendment sanctuary city. I know that spread over quite a few meetings and a lot of conversation, I'm sure, amongst yourselves, the council, about what the appropriate response to that would be. It seemed rather divided in some of the meetings that I sat in. Ultimately, you guys chose to make a statement basically saying that you felt like this was a matter for the courts to weigh in on. Just take me behind the scenes a little bit, if you would, some of the conversations that went on amongst all of you as this was going on.
Well, I mean, this honestly caught us by surprise. We are a small town, we're a small community. We don't see activism like this around issues in our community very often. I mean, this is really, and we felt was an issue obviously that concerned our citizens, and we mentioned that in our statement that we've heard from both sides of this issue. Me personally, 1639 was a poorly written law. That doesn't necessarily dictate that I'm going to go out there and pass a law that says we're not going to follow the law. And that's really where the challenge happened for us. We heard from dozens of people at various meetings. There were, I think, 4 or 5 different rallies in the city on the weekend over the month of March. So we had a groundswell in the community coming to us saying, we want you guys to do something about this. And so then those conversations went on for over a month, almost 2 months. And then I believe in April we had a council meeting where we heard from citizens once again. And then as a council we had a very open and frank discussion about, well, what do we want to do here? Do we want to look at options beyond, or any options, to be honest with you, whether it's an ordinance or a resolution? So at that meeting, we all sort of said our piece about how we felt about the situation. Myself, I said, hey, yeah, the law is poorly written, but I just don't see how we can write a law that's against the law. It doesn't compute well for me, and I knew that it would be an issue, a potential legal issue that would affect taxpayers of Battleground if something were to happen, where somebody were to use a weapon they weren't supposed to have a weapon, and that could fall back on council and the city as a liability issue. So that was a concern of mine and concern of others on council as well. So we continued after that meeting to get what I would consider a barrage of public input via emails and phone calls. I know I did. Talked to other council members, they did as well. Most of those, and this is the interesting point about this, most of those correspondents were the other side of the issue, right? They weren't part of the group that was advocating for an ordinance for a Second Amendment sanctuary city. They were actually saying, we don't want you to do that. We want you to follow the law. We shouldn't pick and choose laws. To that extent, that's where they were going with that. So as that continued to develop, at that meeting, I'll go back again, I'm sorry I skipped this part, but at that meeting where we actually had our dialogue, the council said, okay, Mayor, you work with staff and try to work through some solutions. So what I presented to council, I believe was the first meeting in May, was the statement that I read that ended up going on the record as the council gave consensus to that statement, that, as you mentioned, we were going to we were going to not take any action on this right now for various reasons. So, and again, it was one of those issues where it's a tough issue because, when you're in a position of public service, especially at the local level, you want to help people. That's why you're there. You're there to listen. You're there to help. But the challenge is when you can't help somebody and they're coming to you because maybe they're not being heard by state legislators or they're not being heard in some other manner, but they're coming to you because you're accessible, you're there. And that's a challenge because that's not something that sits well with me either.
Right.
But we, in good faith, speaking from my perspective, I won't speak for the other 6 on council, but felt that we didn't want to take any sort of steps that showed that we were picking and choosing what laws we're going to enforce in our community. That just sets a bad precedent, regardless of how poorly written the law is. And in all likelihood, portions of it, if not all of it, are going to have some significant challenges through the courts and may not make it through. So
it's quieted down a little bit. I imagine you're going to hear more about this come November. So we've got a few folks.
Well, no, we did have a couple people that are now running for city council that first got engaged with the city, as far as I can tell, during this issue. So when this came up in March and April. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. I want to talk to you a little bit about homelessness, which isn't something probably 5 years ago that folks in Battleground would have necessarily talked about or thought about much. But it's becoming increasingly visible in and around the city. As somebody who lives there myself, I see it. Not to the level that Vancouver has been dealing with, but I think the fact that it's spreading out in other parts of the county. I know you guys had sort of a community forum recently. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend it, but got some folks together to talk about this. So I wanted to bring that up a little bit and talk about, from your perspective, what are some of the things that Battleground is dealing with when it comes to homelessness, and what are some of the things that you're looking at in terms of how Battleground can be a player in helping with that situation?
Well, it is an issue in the city. I think a lot of people, and maybe 5 years ago, you're right, it wasn't as prevalent, but it is an issue. We have over 300 families that use the food bank, North County Food Bank, that's located in Battleground, that are considered homeless. We have, I just asked today to get the numbers exact, we have 304 students in Battleground schools in the entire district that are homeless. So it's maybe we don't see the effects of homelessness like you'd mentioned in other communities. We don't see the encampments. We don't see people on the street as much. It does happen occasionally. But the thought was this whole just one thing is what you're referring to. Just one thing Battleground. It was an organic movement that just started to develop here last year and into this year, where it's not an organization. It's a collection of individuals, nonprofits, churches, faith groups that come together and want to do something to help not only prevent homelessness, but end homelessness in our community, and to try to get ahead of it as much as we can. It's happening in our community, so it's hard for me to say that we're getting ahead of it, but I really do think that what this group is doing and the mission it has is unique. We realize there are gaps in the system where people, there aren't as many, people say, well, just if someone's on the street, they should either get a job. Well, some of them already have that, but get a job. There's shelters. Put them in a shelter. There aren't shelters. So what we want to do is we want to connect with people, help them. In this program, we had the town hall meeting last month. We had dozens of people that were there. And a lot of them were engaged and followed up and are continuing to be engaged with and I don't want to call it an organization, but this group of people. And the idea is, the basic premise is we all can do just one thing. We can do one thing each one of us do one thing to help prevent and end homelessness in our community. So it's a really community-based, community solutions approach, rather than turning to government and saying, hey, we need help, we need money. That's important, but it's leaving people behind. And this is, honestly, I think, it's not my idea at all, but it's a truly visionary thing that what we're doing. And I hope as we get this going, that we can have some tangible results to bring back to the community and say, this is working and this is how we're doing it. Because the more people see it working, I think the more engagement we're going to have. And there will be different drives. I know that the group is working on coordinating with other existing drives that happen through nonprofits, like the Elks will do a shampoo drive. And again, it's not about just giving people stuff and helping them get off the street. It's about giving them some dignity. I mean, it's based on 3 principles: giving them support, skills, and hope.
Right.
And I think hope is probably the most important, because talking to anybody who's genuinely struggled through that situation, or even just the insecurity of not knowing if where they're at, the couch they're crashing on, or their car breaks down, what's going to happen next to them, is stressful. I'm just thinking, and really what got me involved in this was thinking of the children. I mean, the fact that I have a 7-year-old, I also have a almost 21-year-old who's been through school, but I started thinking about the 7-year-old and how if we didn't have some stability, that instability, those adverse childhood experiences, as we've talked about,
right,
can just be devastating long-term impacts on people. So it is something I'm passionate about, something I feel the more the word we get out, which appreciate the opportunity to bring this up, people will start to work with us and help us do this. I think it's going to be successful. I know it'll be successful because we have a very caring community, and we'll get this done.
Somebody's watching this and they want to find more information
Sure.
about that. Is there a place they can go?
Yeah, they can. They can go on Facebook. That's probably the best way to do it. There's not a website right now, but it's just one thing, Battleground, and just search it and you'll find the Facebook page.
Great. So let's wrap up a little bit and just talk about you live in Battleground. You don't work there, but other than for the city, you are currently mayor. Now, Battleground, as folks may not know, is a little different. You're not elected as mayor. You're elected to the council. The council elects
Correct.
the mayor.
Mm-hmm.
Just talk a little bit about your aspirations. When you're working for the city, is that just because you love Battleground and you want to serve Battleground? Do you see a future beyond Battleground? Some of your council members are running for county council and
or up for appointments. Or,
yeah.
No, I first got involved in Battleground at this sort of level back when I got on Planning Commission, and it's 10 years, almost 11 years now, 2008. So I've had that interest. I was 28 at the time, about the community, because at that point I did have one younger child, and I cared a lot about and had that vested interest in what the community was going to be about going forward. My wife grew up in a small town in Ohio, and I really wanted to. We felt a connection to Battleground, so we moved into Battleground. Our council is, you're correct, our council does pick the mayor, and it's been a busy, exciting year and a half as mayor, and I'm looking forward to another 6 months and maybe beyond. We'll see if we do some more of that. But as far as aspirations, I always try to find the role that I fit best in my community, and I didn't ask to be mayor necessarily. It just sort of happened with the way things happen. You get involved in certain aspects, and council members reached out to me and said, hey, you should consider doing this, and that's when I really started having those thoughts. So I really try to look at those opportunities to help, and try to find those opportunities to help, and if it ends up being something else along the way later on, but it's not on the radar today.
All right. That's all the questions that I have on my little sheet of paper here. Anything that I haven't asked you about? I always like to give people the opportunity.
No, I think we covered quite a bit.
Great. Yeah. Well, Battleground Mayor Mike Dalesandro, thank you so much for taking a few moments to come
Thank you.
talk to
Appreciate
us.
it. Thank you.